It's Zach Heide with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Craig Bowers. Purdue, no other words than they got punked this game. They lose. It's only an 11-point loss, but that's just thanks to some garbage time minutes. CJ Cox getting hot towards the end. This was a game that Penn State led by, 30 at one point?
Something.
Penn State dominated.
Something like that.
Penn State largest lead was 27. Penn State dominated this game for 36 minutes, excluding garbage time. Took it to Purdue right away and early and often. And basically every concern with Purdue kind of showed up in this game. And Penn State is a team designed to be able to exploit those. We'll get into all of those and all of that throughout this show. But Craig, I'll throw it to you. What are your kind of just big takeaways? I guess I think there's one major one for everybody, but if there's anything beyond that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to go there right away, and it was a big concern of ours coming into the game. If you didn't get a chance to watch the preview show, it shouldn't have been a shock to you if you watched the preview show that we thought this game would be competitive, and that Penn State had a real chance of winning this game. I think obviously I'm not going to speak for Joe, but I did not seeing it turning this badly that quickly in this game. But the big concern was just turnovers, because this Penn State defense is extremely active. This is now their second year under Mike Rhodes. You saw what he did when he was at VCU. He adamantly said in the offseason that he needed more length in the wings to get the defense to be able to do what he did at VCU in a Big Ten type of league. He brought in larger, more longer, more athletic wings, and they were just absolutely disruptive to Purdue. 24 turnovers tonight. That's the most turnovers since November 30th, 2019 against Florida State, where they also had 24 turnovers, another team that had given us problems in past years from that standpoint. So, I mean, without a doubt, that's just the flag that immediately jumps out here, Joe. Not taking care of the basketball. You get 7 turnovers from TKR. You get 5 turnovers from Fletcher Loyer. Can't have 12 turnovers. Really, that's where Painter wants the mark for a game, is 12 turnovers for less. And you can't get it from 2 of your 3 best players, let alone what the rest of the team did tonight on that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I truthfully came into this game, I thought Purdue would lose. I thought that they'd lose by like 5. I did not think that it would be anywhere near what this was. Credit to Penn State. Like, Penn State's good. Penn State is good long term, especially with Purdue being able to, like, in terms of the metrics and all that, Purdue cutting this lead to 11 at the end. This is not going to be resume wise a bad loss whatsoever. It isn't.
It's going to be a quad 1 loss.
Yeah, but obviously watching the game is major concerns, and we'll get into it right there in the Big Ten that can kind of do what Penn State did.
Yeah, and I think Joe's freezing up a little bit here.
My back.
You're freezing up a little bit there, bud.
Yeah, am I good now?
You're a little fuzzy. Do you want to switch your Wi-Fi like you did the other day, and I'll just talk for a minute?
Yeah.
All right. So while Joe gets his Wi-Fi fixed, obviously I think this is a shocking loss to everybody. A game that wasn't nearly as close as what the final score is going to say. At the same time, I think it is good to just like step back and pause a little bit and remember that a team that went to the championship game last year had a similar game in Big Ten play last year out at Nebraska, a game that Nebraska wins by 16. But if we remember watching that Nebraska game, it wasn't nearly as close as what that 16 points looked like either, where Nebraska just absolutely dominated Purdue. Obviously, the question is, does this team have the same type of pieces to just for that to be just a complete shrug off type game, like the game was last year in the end, or not, which I think we'll get into more as we just kind of go through things. And you're back free and clear now, Joe. The best type of Joe is a clear Joe that we can all hear and see.
All right, so yeah, hopefully it holds. I don't know why. It's whatever. We'll figure it out. Hopefully it doesn't come up again. But where I was going was this was the game where it becomes an issue that Loyer and Colvin haven't developed into a secondary ball handler. Loyer can do it against non-super athletic teams. Obviously, Penn State's a very athletic team and very long team. Colvin is maybe he can get closer to it by the time he's done at Purdue, but right now he is not that. This is a game. This is a game where how do I want to word this? If Harris and CJ Cox were sophomores, I think there would be less issues in this game. If long term they're the answer for these types of teams, I just don't like. Is it fair to expect that from them in game 9? And even honestly, Harris and Cox were probably the two best players for Purdue today in my head. Like just straight up, I think they were. I would have liked to see a little bit, probably even more of them throughout both halves, or the first half, I should say. But yeah, this is the game where just you needed that secondary ball handler. You needed Braden to be better too. Like we'll dive into him more. He had 3 turnovers, but like it felt like he had way more, and he passed up a lot of shots, and that thing just can't happen. To Braden when you need this team to function. Obviously, the turnovers from Loyer, TKR were very, very bad. That first half was Lawyer's worst half in a long time. It feels like even in the games where he gets shut down offensively, it's usually he's just kind of like non-existent. This one he was like actively negative, and I feel like especially me, I'm a big Loyer guy. Like I don't always have that. It's usually just he's not really doing anything. He negatively affected the team. So yeah, we'll get into this. Like I don't know. Are you?
Here's where I want to go with this.
Oh,
okay. I have a question. I think you and I both had the same idea of like we need to just like ask some general questions before we dive into the nitty gritty. So I had marked it down to just ask you right away, right off the top, before we really get into the nuts and bolts of this. Does this game say more about Purdue's deficiencies or more about Penn State's a really good team this year?
I think it's truly a combo of Penn State's good. Like Penn State is good. They are also just like they can do all the things that are Purdue's negatives. They can force Purdue to not run their sets and force turnovers. They can have wings that can attack some of Purdue's weaker perimeter defenses. I think like there aren't many teams that can do what Penn State did today, but it's also like you can't ignore that a team like Penn State just did this, right? Marquette did it. Penn State did it. We'll talk about Maryland. They're coming up next. Like there are teams that can do it. There are going to be few of them, but like, can Purdue figure out a way in those games to get a win? My question to you is just like, does this change how you view Purdue in any aspect? Like we already kind of knew the turnover issues and all of that. Like, does this change how you view Purdue in any really way going forward?
I mean, it certainly just magnifies some of the issues. I think most of us after the Marquette game would have been like, all right, so if you have a team that is still really good offensively and has a Cam Jones, and you can create this type of pressure, like you can really create problems for Purdue. I'm not sure that, I wouldn't have said coming in this game that I thought Penn State had the weapons to do the same things offensively that Marquette did necessarily with just Cam Jones alone. Ace Baldwin is incredibly good, but I still want to put the whole team at that same level. So, I mean, it maybe just makes me pause a little bit more and say like, all right, you've got an Auburn team coming up. You've got a Texas A&M team up, both teams that can be a little bit disruptive. You've got UCLA on the schedule yet, which by the way, good job calling me out when I said Penn State was the only team in the Big Ten that could play defensive like this, because I sometimes forget about the Pac-4 a little bit. A UCLA team at some point in the season where, maybe the last 2 years you could survive, because at the end of the day, you could just had such an advantage from the free throw line and rebounding. And you don't have that with this team, especially if you're going to run small ball out as much as they did tonight, which I think we'll get into a little bit more later too. I really think Painter probably wanted to try a bit too big lineup on that second rotation, and then TKR got into foul trouble, but I digress. I think it does raise some eyebrows of like, all right, if you're not going to have the free throw advantage and you're not going to have the rebound advantage just be automatic, then these teams that can pressure like this, it's a lot more simple formula to beat Purdue than it was last year. And to be clear, Penn State won the free throw battle tonight. They won the turnover battle tonight. They won the rebounding battle tonight, and they shot better from three. All four of those things. That is not a formula to win.
Yeah. And that the shooting things, I think, especially when you just go back and look at percentages, it's not going to be talked about that much. Purdue is like 3 just completely good looks that they missed away from like the game being a 6-point game at half. They did not have a lot of good looks in the first half. It felt like every good look that they did have, though, they absolutely missed. And like that's a big swing. I think Colvin misses 1, Loyer misses like 2, TKR misses a bunny or not a bunny per 2, but yeah, this is there was other little things even besides the turnovers that like once Purdue got into their stuff, they just straight up missed some good looks. And that's not a normal thing for Purdue. And I don't expect that to hold for the most part going forward. I think it also just speaks like just the Big Ten college basketball this year, especially, it is just all over. Trey Kamel says Oregon's the best team in the Big Ten. They absolutely could be. They probably should have lost to USC yesterday, and USC's a bottom 2 team. Like, I'm not even I'm not disagreeing with the statement at all, because I think there's a very clear case for that to be the case. But it's also like, if Jackson Shellstad doesn't absolutely dominate that second half, they lose to a USC team that put up 37 points against St. Mary's. It's just where college basketball is. The big thing for Purdue is you cannot let this spiral into 2 games. You cannot let this spiral into a Maryland loss as well. So we've gone like 12, 13 minutes. You were like, because I had that internet issue, you're like sitting really, really still. And I'm like, am I frozen again or what's going on? But no, I'm
trying to get back through all the comments and make sure I starred the ones that we appreciate everybody that comes in here. So I guess while I have this floor for just a second, like hit that like button, subscribe to the Brags in the Stand channel, guys. If you feel like throwing a super chat in there, throw a super chat in there to help support us. We appreciate all of those sort of things. But I was just trying to go back through the comments, because we do like to highlight the things that you guys bring up and make sure that we address those things. So that's why I was so still.
Very fair. I wanted to make sure that I was still good on my end. So dive into some of the more specific and player specifics for this game, or do you have anything else kind of macro level you want to hit on?
I think we'll get into them as we kind of go through the stats and kind of go through the players.
All right. I will pull up the Purdue stats right here. I mean, I want to start with Braden, because we've all been like, hey, Braden Smith's like one of the best point guards in the country. He didn't play like that tonight. 6 points on 3 of 5 shooting, 5 assists, 3 turnovers, 1 steal. And the biggest thing is that it felt like he was passive again. This felt very much like, was it 2 years ago? The Northwestern. Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago, the at Northwestern game. Braden Smith had, it might have been 3 years ago. It might have been, or no, it had to be 2 years ago. His freshman year, where he had like 6 turnovers against Northwestern, a lot of them down the stretch, and just like felt like he was trying to force too many passes. He's got to, at some point, just got to shoot, and he's just got to be able to make some shots. He passed up a few good looking ones. Like, he is a player that, yes, he can make any pass in the world. He's also just got to shoot. And I don't know if I'm going to have super in-depth analysis for really any individual player, because like even for Braden, that's kind of all I have. But just like, if he's going to be the dude, like, he's got to be the dude in these types of games, especially when everybody else is struggling.
Yeah, and it almost felt to me like he came into the game thinking like, well, they're really going to pressure with me. They're really going to try to get the ball out of my hands. And they did at times. And a lot of times he made the right play to get the ball out of his hands. But then there were times where he had looks. And he doesn't need a huge space, right? He's got that little fadeaway that he can hit at a high level. And like you said, it just felt like there were times he was a little timid, a little passive. I don't remember exactly how many minutes it was into the game before he attempted his first shot, but it was late in the first half, if I remember right. And then he ends up with, I think, 4 going into halftime. But I think that could be said for a lot of, like, just across the board. And Raphael called it out kind of as the game was waning down, that Penn State just came out the aggressor. They came out the more physical team right from the jump. And it's the most glaring with Smith because of his usage and the fact that the ball's in his hands so much, but it just felt that way the entire first half. And in that second half, you saw Braden come out and be more physical right away. You saw them try to push the ball a little bit more. You saw TKR and Cam get more physical on the glass, like in that first opening 5 or 6 minutes. But it was too late, right? I mean, at that point, it's a 20-some point game, and you're out of it at that point. So I don't know. I mean, shout out to the Sleepers guys for bringing this up on their show today. But Purdue's 1-5 in their opening Big Ten road game in the last 6 seasons. A lot of those have come right after MTEs. So like that's enough to start being a little bit of a trend. And it just, like in that Ole Miss game, they brought the aggression pretty quickly. And it just felt like it wasn't there for whatever reason tonight. And everybody was a little bit timid.
Yeah. And I feel like that just applies to literally everybody. And it starts with Braden, but it does trickle down from there. And then if there's nothing else on Braden, I think the next guy's probably TKR to go to.
Yeah.
We'll go. All right, let's hit on TKR. I'll read a stat line. I'll throw it to you. 15 points, only 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 7 turnovers for Trey Kaufman-Renn in 29 minutes. I'll throw it to you and let you kind of hit on TKR first.
I mean, we brought this up in the preview show that outside of the Alabama game, this was the first time we were going to see this small ball lineup against a true 7-footer. And I saw some blowback on the pregame, like on the preview show about like us talking about what Niederhauser might be able to do. And like, if you just watched him for the first time tonight, I think you got a little bit of a window of how athletic and long of a defender he is in the post and what he can do. But like the returns tonight weren't great, right? With Trey playing the 5, trying to go up against another 7-footer. I'd be really interested to know. Well, okay, we'll get there in a second. But I mean, if you look at his stat line across the board, right? From a field goal standpoint, it looks all right. 5 of 8. Again, struggles with some free throws tonight. But like from a shooting percentage standpoint, but you get over to the 7 turnovers, and that's just not acceptable. I do think a few of those turnovers were more created by the guards trying to pass him the ball when he had 2 or 3 guys around him already, putting him in a traffic situation that he never should have been getting the ball in the first place. But Penn State does a really good job of swiping at the ball. We talked about that in the preview show. It doesn't matter if it's on the perimeter. It doesn't matter if it's in the post. They want to get as many deflections. They want to swipe down as much as they can, and they do a really good job of it without fouling excessively for as much as they try to do it. And it just disrupted Trey at an ultra high level. He also just kind of got frustrated trying to go up against Niederhauser a few times where he couldn't get the look that he wanted, and that turned into a travel. And I think there's some questions of, when we face some teams with 7-footers, is that going to be the right lineup? Because Painters mentioned it when he was refusing to kind of switch over to this lineup, that Trey is really, really good when he gets to face the other person's 4. And then these last few games, Ole Miss, North Carolina State, some of these other guys as fives are really more built like fours. So in some of these Big Ten games where it's true big physical fives, is it going to work? We're going to have to see. We're going to have to figure that out. Painter's going to be playing with it and trying to figure it out on the fly, but obviously not an ideal situation. I still really wonder, the point that I was trying to jump to a little bit early, Trey gets an early foul, and usually in that rotation, you see Caleb next to Trey relatively quickly. And that kind of gives Painter a feel of like, all right, is our best lineup, the small ball lineup is our best lineup with two bigs out there in terms of Caleb and Trey. And they never really got to see that in the first half.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were still going, but like I said, I don't have too much more on TKR. I think you hit everything. Of a couple times he was probably just put in really bad spots. There was a couple times you could visibly see the frustration, and I think that led to turnovers. And there's a couple times where Penn State's just really, really good defensively at swiping at balls, getting hands. Like I put out the graphic, right? I don't know if there's any publicly tracked deflection stats. The closest thing I have to it, Penn State is the best in the conference, basically getting deflections, and that came through today. It's going to be something to monitor, like you said, of can TKR go up against these bigger fives? He gets Yannick in foul trouble pretty quick. I don't know if that first call was really a foul, but you take it where you can get them, because it goes both ways. But yeah, that probably wasn't a foul. Gets him in foul trouble, but it's still just, can Purdue do it against these bigger teams? Maryland's going to play two bigs. Maybe they aren't the most oversized bigs like Yannick is, right? They're both closer to 6'9", 6'10", but they're going to get another crack at it right away. You looked like you had something.
I was going to say, I'm seeing some of the comments talking about First, and I think a lot of that is based around the idea of First is the primary post, where we're going to feed First, and he doesn't finish strong, that type of thing. But I think when you have First and TKR in there together, where TKR is the featured post, you create some situations where you can go a big to big pass in terms of high low. They did it in that short series pretty quickly when they were out there. And I'm not saying that like First needs to be fed the ball down there when him and TKR are out there at the same time. But you have another big, maybe that forces Niederhauser over onto First at times, and TKR gets to play against that four. First gets to crash weak side offensive glass, which he does at a high level. I think sometimes we're looking at the First in the lineup as a silo of who is Caleb on his own versus who is Caleb next to TKR, and the advantages that it creates for TKR.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. And I think the other thing that's like, I want to say almost been ignored, is that even when TKR is at the four, this offense has been really good. Like,
yeah,
it just like, it feels like the conversation has gone to like TKR at the five is the only way Purdue can be good offensively, and like that's just straight up false. Like,
and it's not what the data says.
Yeah,
right.
Does it have the highest ceiling offensively? I think so, right? If you can get TKR on the post and you have four shooters surrounding him, an elite point guard, yes, like that is the highest ceiling. But like, it's like you said, the data has not shown that it's been like a bad offense. I'm looking it up right now. When First and TKR are in the game together, 125.0 offensive rating, so 1.25 points per possession. In general on the season, Purdue is 1.21 points per possession. And smaller sample size, data can be skewed. That's not saying that's going to be where it is long term, but that is where it is right now.
And I think the big picture thing that is getting lost in this argument, and I don't know how this turned into black or white, right? Like somewhere along the way, it turned into this battle of it has to be small cup ball with TKR at the five, or it has to be your traditional big lineup for Purdue. It doesn't have to friggin' be other, man. Like one or the other. It can be both, and it can be whatever the matchup calls for, right? Like in the right situation, you want the flexibility to be able to go that way. And most of the time, you won't have to. And then run that high ceiling lineup the entire time. And like whatever. I'm over it.
I could talk about that for just the general concept for like 45 minutes. It is my biggest pet peeve in terms of like enjoying basketball, right? This game was not fun to watch for Purdue, but like I enjoy college basketball. I enjoyed watching what Penn State did. It's just like everything has to be black and white, like you said. There can never be any gray. It's I have to be right or I have to be wrong. And it's like sometimes it's a little bit of both. Like, hey, like some lineups TKR at the 5 is going to be amazing, right? The Ole Miss game you saw, like it was fantastic. There's going to be other games where it's just like, hey, this isn't probably the lineup, and both are allowed to happen, and that is okay. And that's where it comes down to Painter has to be the one to make the right decision in the right moments, right? Where what does Purdue need in that specific game? This isn't a super deep team. First, playing well gives them a little bit more depth and ability to kind of experiment, because like Salty B says, the Heide experiment at the 4 is over. We go back one game, the Heide at the 4 was awesome. Like it was, or 2 games even against NC State.
2 games
like,
ago. Yep.
Yeah, like it's especially for a team this young that is still figuring, not young, because they're not a young team, but a team this still trying to like fully figure out their identity. And I think that's the big thing.
They are young though. That's like, they're not young in what we think of young, but almost every team we do prep on, there's like 5 seniors on the team because of this friggin' COVID year, man. Like,
no, that's true.
North Carolina State, just going back through, I was like, my God, like every one of these teams has so many seniors on it. We have 1, right? And we have 3 freshmen playing, two freshmen playing significant minutes now, I guess. But like, this Purdue team is young. It's not Rutgers young, but it's young.
No, it's fair. And I actually just looked it up. They're Purdue's 211th in D1 experience, which honestly was lower than I expected. And that's from Ken Pom, obviously the GOAT site. Penn State is Purdue is 211th. I don't know if I said that or not. Purdue is 211th. Penn State is 60th. Ole Miss was 2nd. I'm just kind of going back through right now. Ole Miss was 2nd. Right. NC State 56th. Marquette 130th. Alabama 24th. So in all the non-bye games, Purdue has been the younger team in terms of D1 experience. I don't know how we got there, but I don't know how to transition out of that back to being on track. But
well, let me do the ad read, because we got a new sponsor of the show tonight. And I want to make sure I get them a shout out while everybody's still in here. So we all know prices are on the rise and your insurance is no different, but the last thing we want to do is deal with multiple companies to try to get a quote. Why not instead call Adam Scheller at Crop Insurance Specialist at 317-385-5293. His experience and multitude of access to insurance companies allow you to push the easy button and just deal with him while he deals with the insurance companies, so you don't have to. Remember to push the easy button and call Adam Scheller at 317-385-5293 for all of your insurance needs. And just to be clear, the company is called Crop Insurance Specialist, but Adam works with both agriculture and crop insurance, but also auto insurance, life insurance, basically all of your insurance needs. He's a Purdue grad, long-term Purdue supporter, season ticket holder to Purdue football games, and a good friend of mine. And if you've ever been in a Purdue football game and heard somebody yell, "Just run the damn ball," that's probably Adam Scheller in the stadium somewhere calling for the running game to happen. So give Adam a call for all of your insurance needs.
Yep. Appreciate them for sponsoring our show. So got a little sidetracked, but I think that's natural in a loss like this. I think the next guy we got to talk about is Fletcher Loyer, who had straight up a bad game. 15 points on 3 of 10 shooting. He did go 8 of 8 from the line. I think 2 of those were technicals, if I remember correctly, but he did get to the line. 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and then 5 turnovers. And I know there's a lot of comments of like, oh, this is classic Fletcher Loyer and all that. Like Fletcher Loyer, I'll look back. He had 5 turnovers. He, in his entire career, has had 1 game besides today with 4. This is his first game ever with 5. Like this was just a wildly uncharacteristic Fletcher Loyer game in some of his decision making. It was a game where I thought Harris should have played a lot more than him, and especially after that first 10-minute stretch. He can shoot the ball really well. Obviously, he goes 1 of 4 today from 3. He can get downhill. He is getting to the foul line a lot, and that's still something I'm going to harp on because He has the third highest free throw rate on this team behind TKR and Caleb first. But at the same time, like he's just the athleticism is just too much for him.
Yeah, and more than anything, I just thought he forced early. Like,
yeah,
this is not a team that you want to drive into traffic against, because there's not many teams in the country that are better about finding the ball cleanly where it's not going to get called as a foul. And I just thought he drove into 2 or 3 guys at different times without a real plan. Kind of doing a little bit of that hunting a foul instead of hunting a shot. And Penn State's pretty good about just taking the ball away. And that was more my concern. And still in the first half, you're like, well, shoot, he's like our second leading scorer on the team when we get to the end of that half. But if you're giving the ball up, 3 or 4 times in that first half and they're taking it the other way and scoring 2, it's a little bit of a wash. And I know you said would maybe rather see Jakari in those minutes. At some point in tonight's show, I want to have a real friggin' conversation about CJ Cox and fit on this team in terms of what this team means. But I know we'll get there eventually. But yeah, I
tweeted out I wanted that second half. I wanted
ahead.
Smith, Harris, Cox. Like that's who I thought needed to be on the floor.
Yeah, no, 100% with just the lineup that they're playing and the needing additional ball handlers. And I mean, CJ comes in when Braden gets in foul trouble. His early turnover was when he was in the game with Braden still. Yeah. At that point in time in the backcourt, kind of gets caught up in it. Doesn't have a turnover the rest of the game. And he led a little stretch there where Purdue actually started to climb back in it a little bit more when Braden went to the bench, and then it kind of started to grow a little bit. But he held his own against that defense when he was out there. And let's just talk about CJ right now.
I have one more thing on Loyer really quick.
Okay, go ahead.
I think where I'm at is Loyer still at times just has to create, but I think it's an issue that he has to. His creation and drive should be because, I can beat this guy off the dribble, not, hey, our offense can't do anything and nobody else can drive, so I kind of have to do this. And that's where it felt like he was at today. And then he forces. So yeah, I'll go to I'll let you talk about CJ Cox.
So here's where I'm at on CJ. And I think there are a lot of guys on this team that do a specific thing better than CJ. Jakari is probably the second best ball handler and creator on the drive outside of Braden. He had another 1 or 2 tonight. I think he got 1 assist off of it, but Jakari, where's he at? Yeah, 2 assists off of that where he creates. I think he's the best at that. Fletcher is the best 3-point shooter. Miles is maybe the most athletic wing defender right now. But CJ just does all of those things at a high level to me, in a pretty complete package. And there's times just because of the fact that he's really the only other guy on this team that can create his own shot where I wonder, and I'm not questioning, I don't make $4 million a year to make these decisions. But to me, there's almost a little bit of Carson in him, not in terms of the style that he plays, right? But we think about Carson when he was really, really good at Purdue, and he needed to get 4 or 5 shots up. And some nights he'd start out 4 or 5. And other nights he'd start out, 1 of 5. But you get him shots, he's going to get going eventually. And then you see Carson go to the Celtics where he gets parked in the corner and he gets 1 shot every 10 minutes. And the dude can't shoot 20% from 3 practically because he's not getting any volume. And there's a piece of me with CJ that just thinks he needs some volume. Like with this group and the lack of shot creation and the fact that you just don't have a 7'4" guy that is always going to have the advantage. Is there a point this season where you think it just becomes all right, CJ is that other bucket getter on this team that can score at all 3 levels, not just from 3, that there has to be an emphasis to get him 4 or 5 shots in the first half of the game, 5, 6 shots?
Well, there was I caught 90% of that. I think there was a specific question at the end I missed.
The specific question was, I think he needs volume. And yeah. I think eventually with volume, he always is going to start hitting shots. And I'm saying just with this team's kind of need for a second shot creator, that can get your own shots at all three levels. Is there a point in time where maybe they just need to look at this and say, look, like we need to make sure we get CJ 5 or 6 shots and just get him going because we have to have him?
I think there are games that it has to happen. Today should have been one of those games. He gets the shots late. I don't think
but
it's
here's where I'm going with this, Joe. If there's going to be games where that's true, can he have games where he gets 1 shot, no shots, go 3 or 4 games in a row where he only gets 1 or 2, and then be expected to come in and be like, oh crap, we're playing a super athletic team tonight. We need you to go out there and score 15 for us.
I think he's that good. So yes, but I understand the sentiment of like getting him more looks. I would be shocked if he doesn't start getting more minutes. He didn't play much in the MTE and he didn't play much against Marquette. I think some of it is defense. I think there's a few times today where he just, and Jakari did it once too that I remember off the top of my head. When I watch back, it is something I'll be looking for. But like Purdue was trying to force sideline. There was 2 to 3 to 4 times where CJ just lets Baldwin go middle. And so I think if I was to guess, and I am nowhere near the basketball savant that Matt Painter is. I know maybe 1% of basketball that Matt Painter does. That would be my guess, is that there's those little things defensively that keep him off the floor. But at the same time, I think today really, really showed that like somebody has to go create a shot. Jakari can't shoot right now. I think long-term he's going to be a fine shooter. Jakari can get downhill, but defenses can just let him shoot. And so that balances out a little bit. CJ's the dude, like you said, he can go create a shot. CJ's not going to get to the rim that much. He's probably not going to get to the foul line too much, but he can go get a bucket. He can go knock down a shot. So yeah, I would expect honestly, I would expect CJ to start getting more run. And it's going to start with the Maryland game where it's going to be a similar style defense. And I think at times Purdue is just going to need somebody to create a shot. I also think with how I'm not saying that CJ's defense was bad by any means. Like he's still a very good defender. I think there's going to be times this year where you just kind of have to go Braden, CJ, Jakari, and you just kind of live with it and knowing that, hey, that's probably the best way to create consistent looks without having to put teams in ball screens, without having to run these complex sets, and just simply be like, hey, go get something.
Yeah, I still think Miles is showing some flashes still of being able to do a little bit off the dribble, not get downhill as much as Jakari, but he's probably got more shot making skills right now than Jakari. So, I mean, I think either lineup you said or CJ Miles at times might be needed. But I mean, Fletch is still, like, to be clear, neither of us are saying that Fletch shouldn't start, that Fletch isn't one of the most important leaders on this team. He's still one of the best 3-point shooters in the country, all of those sort of things. Again, we don't speak in black and whites. We speak in situational lineups when things need to happen. At least I think I speak for you, Joe, when I say that also.
Yeah, and I'll just say with Loyer, like this is his second bad game of the year, first bad game of the year, something like that. It's not like Loyer's been bad. It was just was simply put, like, I love Loyer. I think he's very good. This was an atrocious game from Loyer. Like, you can't sugarcoat that. And I think that's where we're at, right? Where it's like, he's still going to do good things. Purdue still needs him. What they need is that flexibility, and it puts pressure on CJ and Jakari to kind of just grow up quick. And then I think you are right of like, Painter just probably needs to give CJ a little bit more run and let CJ be CJ. Can we jump to Jakari off that? But if you have other CJ stuff, I want to let you cook.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So what did Jakari have? Let me pull up the stats right there. Boom. Jakari for the night, 5 points, 1 of 5 or 2 of 5 shooting, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 turnover, no steals. I was looking at somebody else. Statistically, not a great night. He did finally knock a 3 down, which is great to see. But again, the shooting has not been there. Why, to me, he was the second best player is, aside from CJ in that last stretch, Jakari was the only one to me that didn't look completely phased by Penn State's pressure. Was it a perfect night from Jakari? No. But to me, it felt like very evidence that he just was fine. Like, he was there. He wasn't too pressed with the pressure. I know he didn't get Baldwin on him a bunch, which does help make things look better in general when Baldwin's hounding Braden Smith for 94 feet. But he feels like a very good connector piece for this backcourt. He cannot shoot right now. He defends pretty well. I don't think he's elite, but he defends pretty well, and he can get downhill. And Purdue doesn't have that element. I think it really. If you don't think so, definitely say it. But to me, it just really felt like Jakari was, other than CJ, the only dude that was like fine handling pressure. Not even that he was great, but just fine.
Right. And he's really been, CJ handles pressure to get to his shot primarily. He can, like, he does the point guard job very well in terms of getting the ball across half court and getting a set started. But once CJ goes, more times than not, he's either hunting his shot or he's kicking it back outside. Jakari's the second best on this team in terms of getting downhill and finding a guy in the post or spraying it out to a wide open wing. I would completely agree with that. Yeah. You want to jump to first?
Yeah. I think Jakari, like,
or do we need to talk about the donut that Cam put up?
We can. Whatever you want to go to, I'll follow your lead.
You have a starter that got 0 points, 0-2 from the field, 0-1 from 3 rebounds, and 1 turnover in 20 minutes. There wasn't a lot that stood out with some players tonight. There was a lot that stood out of like, wow, that was bad. And there were some that stood out, not a lot, that like had some really good moments. Cam just kind of fell to the wayside in those conversations in general. So I guess what in general was your take on Cam tonight?
I agree. He was non-existent. Not non-existent. He had 3 steals. Like, he did some things defensively. It's another, I don't know. It feels like a tough spot when his offense, more so than probably everybody on the entire team, needs to come from somebody creating. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily Cam running away or anything. It's more just like Purdue physically couldn't get him the ball because they couldn't get the ball across half court, or if they did, they barely did, and then it was a turnover within 5 seconds probably. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I guess, is that a knock on Cam? Is that a knock on the rest of Purdue? Is it both? Like, does Cam need to be more aggressive? Do you trust Cam creating, though, off the dribble against a team like Penn State's? And like, probably not. And so it just feels like this matchup where maybe he can get a putback, maybe he can get a catch and shoot 3 sometime. But other than that, I don't know what he's really supposed to do offensively. And that's where long-term he does have to be able to be more comfortable. Like, he's not going to run pick and rolls, but if he can be, hey, I'm in the corner, my guy closed out hard, catch 2 dribbles, let me get to the rim. If he can develop that, that'll be big.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had this conversation like since the middle of summer that Miles isn't gonna create his own shot. That he's, he can attack a closeout if somebody dives out. He can hit threes and be a lob threat at special, unique times, right, in transition or on a backdoor or something like that. So it is tough when a team pressures like this. And I did think there was like 1 or 2 times where he had a sliver. Like, you're 6'7". If you have that sliver, that guy coming out closing out on you 6'5" or 6'6", you've got enough space. Like, you're a good enough 3-point shooter. Go ahead and fire away, man. But yeah, it was just like, I don't know. It wasn't a bad game because there weren't any glaring errors, but at the same time, there just wasn't much out there from an output standpoint from him. I need to backtrack for just a second because like, we said this at the time, and I feel like we just glossed over it. But Matt Painter said, so Newbert asked, it was either after the NC State game or the Ole Miss game, asked Painter about the fact that TKR was pushing for the small ball lineup so much. And, was it nice to see that playing out well with him pushing that as much? And Painter said, whichever game he had 13 rebounds is when this happened. Because Painter said, when he gets 13 rebounds, we can do that. But if he's only going to go out and get 3 rebounds, we cannot do that. TKR had 2 rebounds tonight as a starting 5, Joe.
Yeah. And like simply put, he has to be better. Like I don't have hard hitting analysis.
Right.
This does segue a bit to another thing that's been talked about in the chat. If you want to just let me go to it, we can. If not, we can save it for later because I was going to hit it later. But Derek Mulliken brings up Purdue is bottom 20 in the country in pace. Feels like something we have to change with this group. If we are small, we have to run and gun. We are playing significantly slower than last year. I think a lot of this starts, well, first of all, they aren't bottom 20 in country in the pace. They're like offensively, they're bottom like 53. But the sentiment is there, right? That this is a slower team. I think it started with the sleepers being like, hey, this is Purdue's slowest paced team in really a long time. The issue, and I'm trying to, I think it was Purdue Fox. I don't know if you watched the show, and if I've got if you are watching, you know who I'm talking about. I believe it's Purdue Fox in the Sleepers Discord. Brought up a good point when we were all discussing of like, hey, is it how like easy or hard is it to run when Cam and Miles have to crash the glass, right? In theory, it's fantastic that you can have this 5-out lineup, lots of athleticism, push the ball, run, space, all of that. But what happens when a game like today happens and TKR has 2 rebounds? You can't run if you don't grab the ball. And that means Colvin and Heide have to crash hard. Braden Smith's going to lurk around the 15-foot area and just look for those kind of elbow-type rebounds. There are things that they can do to push the pace, right? I'm not saying that they shouldn't push the pace more because I think they should, but it is hard to do when your 2 guys realistically that you want running in transition have to be within 5 feet of the rim because otherwise Purdue's going to give up 45 offensive rebounds. And so it gets tougher in that area for them to be able to do it. Now, there's also another aspect of like, I think the offensive numbers get skewed a bit that Purdue will run complex sets that take 10 seconds to set up and then get into their look. They will run post-ups where TKR catches. You have to wait for 1 or 2 guys to clear. Then you're going to get into a few dribble post-ups. That takes time, all of that. And so it all just kind of adds up into this slow-paced team for Purdue. But at the same time, it feels like maybe there are a few spots where they could push more. You saw it to start the second half. They ran a little bit, saw some success. But those mainly felt like longer rebounds where Braden or Loyer is able to just kind of grab and go and just get out and run that way. So I like, and I know I'm kind of rambling here at this point right now, but like this feels like very much in theory, it would be fantastic to let Purdue run more. And there are probably little things to make it a little bit better. But I don't know grand scheme if you're playing TKR at the 5, if you can consistently afford to do that. Unless you're just willing to give up the rebounds.
No, I think that's a great point that you bring up in terms of what'd you say his name was? Boiler what?
I think it was Purdue
Purdue
Fox on the Sleeper Discord. I can look it up while you're talking.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. I know that is a really good point, just in terms of the fact that you have to have both of your wings crashing the glass because you don't have a dominant rebounder anymore. I do think too, it is a Purdue issue first, right? But putting the stats together on all these opposing teams, like over the last, how many games have we played now? 8 or 9?
9.
However many games. 9 games. Like it felt like every time I put that stat sheet together, I was like, oh, they're in like the top 20 enforcing the longest possessions on defense. Like
Yes.
just over and over, like similar to turnovers, I do think do I think this team is going to play as fast as maybe you and I thought this summer if they went to this small ball lineup? No. I do think there's also something to be said for the other teams that they have played who are purposely trying to make those possessions really long and not allow them to score. And facing quite a few teams that do it at a relatively high level, even Texas A&M Corpus Christi, for Pete's sake, like as a low major team, is a team that it does a really nice job of that. Yale slows you down to a degree. So I do think they've just faced a lot of teams that can do that. I think pace is going to slowly tick up the further we get into the season. Is it going to be as fast and dynamic as maybe we thought in July? No, I don't think it ever gets there.
Yeah,
Did you
no,
see my
that
private chat?
I did. Are you good now?
No, I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
Is that why you were rambling?
Yeah.
Shoot. Okay.
I can do it again. I can ramble again. I don't know if this will be coherent thoughts, but we'll just go with what I got. This is going to be the solo Joe Shack section. I guess I could, like, I don't have a ton for the board, but I can come up with something. This is going to be really great content for you guys because my marker is not with me. So I have to go get that. Yeah. All right. So I think the big, like, right, schematically, Penn State played a style where they just physically didn't let Purdue get into what they wanted. We'll talk about the high hedge a bit, right? Because that is going to be the big talking point. And I'm going to start by saying that one thing is they're just Marquette, Penn State, there's a couple other teams are able to play this high hedge while also still having a lot of length on the backside and rotate. A lot of teams at high hedge do not have that. Like Northwestern, they don't really have that. What are some other teams? Iowa at times will do it. They don't really have that. Michigan State sort of has it, but not entirely. And I think the big thing that stood out for me, though, in this game specifically is like Braden Smith was starting out here and TKR was screening him out here, right? And so if you have the defenders here, it felt like with this hedge right here where, you know, so screens happening here, Braden Smith comes, this hedge was like forcing Braden to here. And so even what this does is like, even when Braden Smith tries to turn the corner, if he turns the corner, he's getting to like here, right? And like this type of area, he's not getting here. And so it just felt like if Purdue could have started their sets even just here, right? And somewhere in this area. Now when he turns the corner, because he was able to do it a few times in this game, he does it a lot against even especially like teams that don't have the length on the backside or out of the big man. He can turn that corner, and then once that happens, it's 4-on-3, right? Where you have shooter, and then if it's like Heide, you have another shooter, right? And 4-on-3. It really stood out that happened. Now the one thing Purdue does to counter it, I guess I could leave these here. So you have something like this, even if it's up here, and I didn't see it quite as much today, which I was surprised, is when this hedge happens, right? So high hedge where whoever's defending the screen, he's going to pop out and just try to force the ball handler, Braden Smith, to go this way, basically off the edge, which is what basically Purdue felt like they did today, is what they'll do is, so this hedge happens, Braden Smith drags it out. So now it's here, the big's here, Braden Smith's defender is here, and then TKR immediately rescreens. And so now look at what this happens, right? When that so Braden Smith starts here, brings it over, he rescreens. Now this big is out of place. It's hard for him. Generally, now they're going to have to start doing this, right? And coming down here and meet Braden Smith somewhere in this area. I didn't feel like I saw that as much today, and I could be wrong with it. But I know that's something that they go to a lot, is that rescreen action just to get that defender out of position. But then it also goes back to when you're starting, legitimately 40 to 45 feet away, it doesn't really matter if you rescreen because now the defender is just going to meet him at 28 feet, right? And usually when that happens, it's Braden Smith on that rescreen is now getting into the arc and being able to create from there. So Kraig is back. We don't have to solo me. I don't know if you heard me. I left the chat solo for like 2 seconds.
I always have my headphones on. I'm always listening. I could picture what you were putting on the board and what plays you were talking about. We did. I don't know if this is exactly what you were talking about, but one of the things I think we brought up in the preview show was I think it was Clemson kind of attacked them with that little side pick and roll action. It really, I only remember seeing it. It was actually Fletcher that fed the ball to TKR. They scored on it right away.
Yeah. That's
really the only time I remember it jumping out to me that we ran that kind of from the side or from the wing position. But I don't like this game is not about we should have ran this play more, we should have ran that play more. They just came out and dominated Purdue in every facet of the game.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And Penn State did a good job of forcing Purdue to start high. I am curious, did it?
And it's
feel
not like when Jaden's starting high, right? Because like when Jaden starts high, you love it because he builds
Yeah,
up a head of steam, or like
Yeah.
Halliburton, right? For the Pacers, where you're letting Jaden just build up those wheels like, you know, a road runner and get downhill. It's not the same thing with Braden out there necessarily.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think one thing that's been interesting, I'm looking up the exact stats now. Let's see. Yeah, Purdue is among the top teams in the country in terms of pick and roll usage. And right, it's really, really swung that way, where it's just lots and lots of pick and roll. Did it feel like I understand? Okay, I'm going to answer some of the question already because I know part of the answer is that, hey, Penn State just didn't let Purdue get to what they want. But did it feel like Purdue just ran way less sets than normal, or was that just like I randomly noticed that this game? Because right, like I don't
know,
feel
'cause
like
I
Loyer
thought-
got design looks really at all throughout the game, or Colvin, or anybody really.
I mean, those drives where he kind of drove into traffic were all coming off that, you know, like dribble handoff off the
That's
initial
true.
pin down set, right? And like, I mean, right away in the game. So in the first 3 minutes when there was still hope, right? One of the things I brought up in the preview show was I bet Painter tries to feed TKR and get Niederhauser in foul trouble. And he feeds him like 3 out of the first 4 plays. Niederhauser picks up his first foul and he gets pulled. And I'm like, all right, it's happening. Like, we got Niederhauser on the bench. Now we're going to get rolling. And it just turned out that Penn State's still fine if Niederhauser isn't on the floor as a defensive team still. And I listened to 2 or 3 preview shows. We released ours first. I listened to 2 or 3 others after that. And I only heard one really mention Kern. Shout out Carter Elliott for mentioning Kern as such a defender as he is. But I don't know what his actual stats showed in terms of steals and everything else. But I thought he was just friggin' disruptive to our wings in general all night long. And he is, I know you said it on the show that if Ace Baldwin was a defensive player of the year, he'd have a much better case for a defensive player of the year. But man, he's so good as a defender.
He's so good. Nick Kern is so good. Like I said it on the preview show, which if anybody that watches our post-game shows didn't know, we do the preview shows for basically every single Purdue game. But yeah, Nick Kern, 12 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, probably 6 deflections. Like it felt like I think I remember him. I don't know if he gets credited for the steal or not, but I do remember him ripping TKR at least once. And I think one other big on like where they're going up for a layup and he just rotates and just rips them. And that's just the story of the night is Penn State had those dudes. Nick Kern is fantastic. Ace Baldwin's fantastic. But even the other guys, Puff Johnson had 4 steals. He can get his hands on things. Fred Dillon, 2 steals. I'm looking at the stat sheet now. This might be the most shocking thing of this entire show, segment, whatever you want to call it. Ace Baldwin did not record a steal this game. I would have guessed he would have had a bunch. But just kind of goes to show Penn State has dudes that are able to do it. Nick Kern, like you said, shout out Nick Kern because he's good. I love watching Nick Kern. Probably leader for 6th man of the year, maybe an all defense team. I don't know how.
And probably the thing that surprised me the most from Penn State is, in all honesty, like I've not been a Puff Johnson fan. I've generally felt like he's a guy that records his stats against lower level teams and disappears in big games. Watching Penn State last year and just watching Dillon in the games that I watched leading up to this and looking at him statistically, the whole thing was he's not a shooter. Well, he goes 2 of 3 from 3 tonight, 6 of 11 from the field. And like, to me, it was like, all right, contain Baldwin. He's going to get his, but contain him. Contain Niederhauser, contain Hicks. But then Dillon and Johnson go off for 27 points combined. Because like the problem wasn't just Purdue offensively, right? Like, I mean, that was a major problem, but also gave up 81 points and let a couple of guys get off scoring wise that aren't necessarily elite scorers for Penn State.
And that goes back. I think I briefly made the point of like Purdue missed some shots early in that game when it could have swung the other way quickly. And Penn State generally took advantage of those misses. And like you just said, somebody was making a shot, whether it was Puff Johnson, whether it was Freddie DeLeon. Obviously, Baldwin and Kern did their thing. Twice that I can recall off the top of my head that Purdue just didn't, and Zach Hicks had 2 threes. Twice, Purdue just didn't get a hand up on Zach Hicks for whatever reason. The dude is shooting 50% from 3 on the year. Like, the hand just wasn't up. There was so many little things too of it. It just was like, yeah, Purdue is just completely outmatched today, simply put. Obviously, 24 turnovers. Purdue turned the ball over 1 in every 3 possessions today. Like, that's wild. That is wild. We, a long time ago, earlier in the show, maybe like 30 minutes ago, we're like, should we talk about Caleb first?
Yeah, and then we never did.
I think he's the last. I think he's the last player, unless you want to talk about Burgess a bit too. I think he's the last player.
No,
we're gonna have to.
First is fine. Yeah.
2 points, no rebounds, no assists, 3 fouls and a turnover. Closer to the Heide of just like, hey, he didn't do a whole lot. But it felt like you had something you want to say about first today.
Well, he only played 8 minutes total. So, I mean, we can say that about Cam, but Cam played 20. Caleb got in for 8 minutes of this game total. And I just felt like the lineup change got disrupted in general in this game. And I feel like it's the first time that it did. Some of that was Braden having to go to the bench. Some of that was TKR picking up an early foul and Painter pulling him and going to the bench. But it felt like he couldn't get his lineup changes, his rotations exactly like he normally wants them to be. I mean, I guess with that said, a little bit of a bright spot was when Braden went to the bench. We kind of found that CJ was going to be decent tonight for Purdue, but by and large, it just felt like a weird game that, I don't know. You've got all those charts. Maybe you can look at them when this show's over, but it felt like a wonkier rotation than normal.
Yeah, I mean, so, okay. For whatever reason, I have the rotation chart up for anybody that's listening on audio. For whatever reason, I cut out Braden Smith's rotation in this. I don't know why. I have it here. Braden Smith, he sat from 9 to 5 in the first half, and he basically sat most of the second half of the second half. But yeah, I mean, you can look. First only plays 3 first half minutes, right? And he picks up 2 quick fouls. They sit him. They go back to TKR and Heide a lot, and then they have a bigger stint of Heide and Burgess, right? Where I don't think Burgess looked bad today. Like, I don't think he was. Yeah, I don't think he looked bad. Yeah. I don't think it was in Painter's cards to play Burgess 5 first half minutes though either. And so I think you are right that the rotation definitely did get messed up, especially with just the overall foul trouble. That side note, that first half was gross to watch. Like, there was just no flow in that game whatsoever. Like, beyond just Purdue playing bad, there was just no flow, which is part of Penn State, a little bit of part of Penn State style.
Okay. With that said, and just, I've only seen it a couple of times. I don't feel like it's been in the chat a bunch. But if you walked away from tonight's game and felt like one team got a whistle more than the other, where do you feel like that would have been favored? Because I have my thoughts.
Which team had the favorite whistle? Like, which team got the better whistle?
Or just call it a push.
I would probably call it a push. I don't like. There's probably a couple missed calls both sides, but nothing. Too,
I would either call it a push or actually say we got a better whistle than they did, because like there was a couple of fouls against Penn State, a couple of balls that went out of bounds that clearly like went off a leg or whatever of a Purdue player. Where I was like, Purdue kind of got a break there. And dude, I guess we do need to mention Matt Painter got his first technical since 2015. So congrats. I don't know what he said because it wasn't demonstrative in terms of his just like physical reaction, but whatever he said must have really, because it was fast, because the ref turned to Ray, away, turned back again, and Painter said one more thing, and then it was boom. So whatever he said, got it. But that technical against Ace Baldwin was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. He was doing the Braden Smith.
Well,
and maybe that's why, because they knew he was specifically trying to mock Braden, but like Braden does that.
Ace Baldwin does that
multiple.
Ace Baldwin does that multiple times every game. That is not him taking Braden Smith's thing.
Yeah,
he always does
like
it because he does it more
terrible.
up here. That is like
was terrible.
Ace Baldwin does that every game. That was maybe he did it more because Braden, the Braden thing, but like I don't think Ace Baldwin was doing that to get at anybody. Ace Baldwin was doing that because he does that every single game. Like I've watched, I think 7 of their games now. He does it every game. That was, an awful technical on him. I don't understand it at all.
Well, the chat is giving me some faith that like we're not complete homers and we can all call that technical out as being complete bullcrap. So
yeah, no, that absolutely was. We're an hour and 5 in. I feel like this is even after a horrible loss has been a good discussion, and there have been a lot of good discussion points to come out of it. Do you have anything else, whether it be individual player, big picture, long term, how you feel about this team? Just kind of anything, as I assume we want to wrap this up sometime soon.
Yeah, let's wrap it up sometime soon. I'm assuming we want to go through some starred comments as well. Yeah. Dude, I totally had a thought in my head and then I just lost it. I was going somewhere, Joe. I was going somewhere with this, and I completely
we were
lost
talking
it. That's
about
okay.
bogus technical refs, bad refs, not being a homer.
That was a completely different direction, and then I just totally lost it. But it is what it is. Big picture things, I would say. I think we all need to. The issues are different, right? But I think we all do need to take a step back and be like, remember what it felt like after that Nebraska loss last year, and a whole bunch of people across the country were like, we all found the way to expose Purdue, and this is the exact way that you beat Purdue and whatnot. Now, maybe this one is a little bit more real because Marquette attacked Purdue a little bit in the same way, but does this mean Purdue's not going to be good? No. Does this mean Purdue's not going to contend for a Big Ten championship? No. Does this mean Purdue has real problems they have to find out what to do with? Yes. One of the things that Painter constantly says is that sometimes a loss gives you more to learn and grow about your team than a win, or a bad win, right? Can do the same thing. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where they go here in terms of what they tried to decide to do with rotations against certain teams and lineups against certain teams. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with the CJ, Jakari, Miles, Fletch, where they get minutes, who they get minutes against. Like, we may all look back in 2 months and be like, all right, this is the moment that Purdue realized, like, CJ's a dude. And I realized some of those points were against garbage time, right? But Penn State had their starters in there really late in that game, and CJ was still getting his buckets. And, like, might this be a little bit like Carson's freshman year, where there was a point that team wasn't near as deep, so he got more minutes early, but where it's like, oh, okay, like, we have a dude, like, we've got to figure out how to incorporate him more. We might all look back in 2 months and say this was a turning point from a loss. So I just don't think we need to overreact, while at the same time acknowledging that there are certainly issues that Purdue's going to have to figure out.
Yeah, CJ Cox did have all 12 of his points in the second half, and he played the last 11 minutes of the game. Didn't put up a shot in the first half, but yeah, I'm with you. Like, so if this was facetious, my bad. Jared Kasaki says, so is this a rebuilding year? Like, maybe you were being facetious, but obviously this isn't a rebuilding year. And I guess for me, I think I was probably a little lower than consensus on Purdue coming into the year. And so this feels closer to where I thought that they'd be. This is, so far, Purdue has looked solid or solid to great in every game except for 2 games. And in those 2 games, the 2 teams did basically the exact same thing to Purdue. And so it's right now it is this one issue, not one issue, but like this style is something they have to figure out. 80 to 85% of games aren't going to be this style, right? And if they do, teams try to get to it, they're probably playing out of their norm. And so then you kind of see where it goes from there. So I'm with you. Like, I think.
Go ahead. Keep going.
No,
but
go.
I remembered my thought.
Go.
No, I
Go.
remembered my thought.
I was just going to say, this is a still very good team in a college basketball season that is wild and all over, and a Big Ten conference that nobody has looked good every game. Oregon's 9-0 still. They went to overtime against like Portland, and they were down 5 with 15 seconds. Like, they've done that multiple times. Like, I like Oregon. I'm not saying that they're bad. I think Oregon's very, very good. But like, this Big Ten's wide open. And so a loss right here is not the end of the world. What was your point?
Not just the Big Ten. Like, let's all remember just how putrid the ACC and Big East in general has looked this year. A lot was made about maybe the Big Ten would be the worst conference coming into this year. And right now it looks like we're comfortably in middle ground with the Big 12 this year in terms of where that's going. So I just don't think there's a lot of dominant teams out there, and there's plenty of room to grow. And I think you're going to see some just like strange blowouts where matchups are really bad. But Joe, where I was going with this, we've been giving a game ball out every day. We can't not give a game ball out just because of a loss.
Okay.
If you had to give a game ball today, have to give a game ball, where are you going?
Does it have to be Purdue related?
Yes.
Okay, because otherwise it'd be like Nick Kern probably. But
Okay. Me too.
I'll take. It feels like you very much have like a specific place you want to go with yours. I'm just gonna say Jakari. CJ's late scoring burst was fantastic to see, and I'm hoping it leads to some more minutes. When the game was still in hand, Jakari felt like the best player to me. So I'll go to Jakari.
I mean, yeah, I guess I didn't bring this up specifically just to give it to CJ, but like, I feel like we can't just chicken out of the game ball just because we lost.
Fair enough.
So I'm still like, I realize it was late, but again, still was playing against starters for a lot of those minutes. Penn State didn't really pull them until super late and hit some tough shots. So I'm going to give it to CJ as just like a glimpse of positive tonight for a piece that we might be able to incorporate more.
That's fair. I do think I could be incorrect. I do think the order was kind of Penn State's up 5 trillion points. Some backups come in. CJ Cox starts going off. Starters come back in. CJ Cox continues to go off. Is I kind of think how the order went. This was big for CJ.
You want to nitpick,
but I'm getting to the bigger point of like this is just big for CJ to see the shot. CJ hadn't made a shot made a 3 since Alabama, and he's only made 1 shot since that game. 3 of the games he didn't play a lot of minutes. The only shot time he made a shot was Marshall. He was 0 for his last 5 coming into this game from 3. I think there's the fair point like that you've been hammering of like, hey, shouldn't he just kind of get more shots and more run, and that'll help him get into a better rhythm. But this very easily could be the start of that. And I think you are absolutely correct in that. So definitely want to give you a shout out there. We're an hour 15. We still have a bunch of start comments to go through. Want to just jump into those, or you got something else? I mean, we can make this a 2-hour show. Remember when we used to do those with like Aiden, like 2 hours?
Yeah, it's because we had 4 of us talking, and every time we handed the mic over to Greg, he talked for 10 minutes straight.
Yeah. I remember.
I mean, shout out Greg. We love Greg, but Greg gets on some monologues.
No, he does. I remember. Shout out Aiden also. He's doing big things over at Incarnate Word. I think they had a big game, pretty big game today. I know they're playing better this year for sure. But I remember like texting him when we were in the midst of that at some points of like, I was just like, dude, there's times I stopped talking and like, I know I'm not talking for 20 minutes again. Like, I just know it's not going to get back to me for that long. And he was just like, yeah. Shout out Aiden, shout out Braggs for everything. And then, yeah, let's get into some of these start comments, but
yeah, I'll read them out.
It almost feels good. It almost feels good to do one of these again. Just like rambling nonsense all over. I don't want to do it every game.
we talked about in some of these earlier games, it was like we just kept feeling like we were saying the same positive stuff over and over again, and there wasn't
Yeah.
like a whole lot to break down. So Jack Spoiler says, what's the fix, Joe? Give us your answers so you can go make $4 million a year also.
I think Purdue should probably turn the ball over less, and then when they get the shots, they should put them in more, is the general answer. But to summarize, because I think we've hit on a lot of it, this game is like, 1, be patient. 2, in some capacity, somebody has to be able to handle the pressure besides Braden, and also Braden has to handle it better.
Yeah. So this next one was points off turnovers was bigger than just the turnover difference. And I don't remember if I actually tweeted this or whether I started to and then quit, but there was a point in time, even when I was tweeting about how long it had been since Purdue had this many turnovers, that they were only like -4 in turnovers. But the points off turnovers was massively different because dead ball versus live ball turnovers. And I think that's where Purdue got in trouble a lot tonight, is so many of those turnovers were live ball turnovers that led to immediate fast break points for Penn State. So Penn State has 14 fast break points to Purdue's 11. Some of Purdue's came later in the game, but points off turnovers, Penn State had 32. Purdue had 10. And I think a lot of that speaks to what Penn State was able to do in terms of recovering against Purdue when they did have turnovers and then disrupting in a half-court set. So Heather Garrison says, unless you had something to add there. Heather Garrison says, almost as if Kraig knew when he posted several days ago that going to the volleyball game would have been more fun than staying at home and yelling at the TV. I promise you, I did not know it was going to be this kind of game. I thought Penn State had a legitimate chance to win, but I did want to make sure we shouted out Purdue women's volleyball. They win 3-0 today. BYU gets upset in straight sets as the 5th seed against Chicago Loyola. So Purdue will take on tomorrow night Chicago Loyola for a chance to go to what would be the Sweet 16 in Louisville's region. If you're around, if you can get to campus, I don't even know if there's tickets available. I made a plea for people not to stay home and watch the basketball game and buy tickets, and then they sold out in a minute. So then I felt like an idiot, like thinking that people wouldn't go buy volleyball tickets. But if there's tickets available for tomorrow, buy them from a third-hand site. Get there. Holloway is my second favorite place to watch a Purdue sports on campus. Derek Mulligan says, just don't see any toughness on this team. That was a staple the last few years, and it's gone. Gillis, Edie Jones, all tough players. We don't have a tough player or players.
I do think there's truth to that. Like, when you think of Mason Gillis, you think of toughness. Nobody really pops into my head when you say that word of being like that tough, physical kind of glue type guy. I don't know if you disagree or agree.
No, I mean, I think it was certainly true tonight. I think in some other games we've seen that in the first half, and then they've come out and been like, TKR's had some games where he's come out and just been ultra physical and aggressive around the glass and getting into bodies in the second half. But it does. And Painter's talked about this more from a communication standpoint, about this team just isn't aggressive in talking and calling everything out to make sure everybody knows what's going on. And it does feel like there's a level of passiveness. On this, Derek might be right. And like, I don't like to think that I'm co-signing like a call out of toughness, but there needs to be more for sure. And I think Jakari is one of those guys that can be that guy out there, but guys are going to have to step up and do it for sure.
Yeah.
Jack Spoiler, again, need to improve on defense, force more turnovers, play the passing lanes. I'm sorry, but Loyer and Smith on the floor at the same time make this a bad defensive team. Do you think there's any truth to that matchup? Specifically, instead of like a Jakari or a CJ next to Smith at times, or do you think? I don't know where I'm going with that.
especially in certain matchups like this, I think it is pretty factual to say Harris and or Cox over Loyer is a better defensive group. Maybe even Harris and or Cox over Colvin, depending on matchup, right? Or both of them in, right? Colvin obviously has been much better defensively this year. I'm not taking that away from him. I would like to see them force more turnovers. I put out the tweet, right? Purdue just does not force steals. They do not get blocks. They do not get deflections. And when you have no true rim protector and you're going to play TK at the 5, that was like my plea in the summer. I don't know if you remember me talking about it, but I know I've said it offline. I'm 99% sure I've said it online of like, to me, the way TK at the 5 works defensively is it is this more aggressive defense that we don't usually see from Purdue that tries to force turnovers, is fine getting beat because they're kind of getting beat anyways, even if they aren't playing ultra aggressive. And now at least you can hopefully force some turnovers, and that's where you get out and run a little bit. There are times though that, like, yes, Harris and or Cox over Loyer better defensively, but there's a lot of times where it's just you need both in because Smith and Loyer are very talented and very good at basketball, and Loyer is very good at basketball and can shoot the hell out of the ball and can still create plays for himself and others. This feels like a very much an anomaly of his facilitating. Of he like was awful today. This isn't usually how he is. He's not like a super high assist guy, but like can make the right play. And so it goes back to this gray area, right? Of yes, but sometimes no, I guess is my answer.
Right. I do remember right after Golden Black first kind of reported that this small ball lineup was going to be the most likely lineup that Purdue started with, which took a little bit longer to come fruition than when it was reported, right? But I specifically remember in that episode, we were talking about lineups, and there was a moment where me and you both looked at each other and we're like, wait, is the small ball lineup better with a Jakari or a CJ? like because you need that extra perimeter defense if you're going to do the small ball lineup. So I do think it's a little bit tricky is like your best players, if you're just going to put your best players out there, the starting lineup is their best players, right? But does it all fit just perfect for how you might have to play if you're going to play that small ball lineup? But it just also goes back to like, is Fletcher doing enough positives on the other end that outweigh what's happening on the defensive end? And 90% of the times that's true. But I do think there's a case for just, if you're going to do the small ball lineup, is there a case you can make for needing that added perimeter defense out front? Like, I'm not going to argue with you if you're like adamant that you think that's true and that needs to happen. So, Mike Crowley, weigh in, Mike, if you're still listening. Tell us how to pronounce your name. Do you think Purdue lacks 3 of the most important traits to succeed in NCAA basketball: speed, size, and athleticism? We got exposed really badly in terms of ability to create space off the bounce. So I'm going to go first and then let you talk, Joe. I think what you're talking about are 2 entirely different things to a degree. And I guess I like to speak about this often when we talk about it, because we were talking about it in relation to Miles and as to Cam. So this has largely been viewed as Purdue's most athletic team in a really, really long time, because you have super athletic wings in terms of speed, in terms of jumping ability in Miles and in Cam. But there's difference between that and athleticism with the ball in your hand, which I affectionately like to call juice with the ball in your hand. Like you've got the ability to have the shiftiness and shake and have that athleticism as you drive to the rim when defenders come out at you. And I think Purdue has more athleticism, and quite frankly, like on the wings, we're as long and as athletic and as fast as I can think about us being at the 3 and the 4. Not as long, probably, but as fast and as athletic as we've been since Painter's been here. But they don't necessarily have that athleticism with the ball in their hand trying to drive. And I think that's where you're really trying to point out.
Functional athleticism. You can have athletic dudes, but if it doesn't translate, it doesn't mean much. And Colvin and Heide they've done a good job for the most part on the boards. That's where some of the athleticism comes in. But yeah, like out of the players that are specifically going to make plays, that's where there isn't a ton of athleticism. I don't know if I would say they're the three most important traits to succeed in NCAA basketball specifically.
Like skill is important too. Like skill and shot making, passing.
Like
those are important.
We're gonna play Texas A&M in a week. We'll see what happens within the game, but like that is a team that has a lot of athleticism. They don't have a ton of skill, and it's not like they're in any better position than Purdue right now. Gray area. You need a little bit of both.
Need a little bit of both. All right. Oh, shoot. I just unstarred one. So Corey said, why did Painter quit this game so early tonight? He pulled everyone with 10 minutes left to go.
It feels like you just... It feels like you didn't watch the game with context. Like if that's your takeaway, like the run started happening when some of these starters were pulled. And then if they're the ones playing well and getting you back in the game and CJ Cox is scoring, like that's kind of who you have to ride with at that point. When you go from down 30 to down 18 because of those players, like you kind of just have to go with them, especially when who else had been good that game. I don't know if that's too harsh, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, no, because I mean, Smith came back into the game. Like,
yes,
I think Smith got pulled around then. I know he did because I typed it in. Smith got pulled right around then, but he brought Braden back in later. Like I don't think that he was done. I think that was his initial pull. They started to make that run. CJ got cooking, and then I don't know what it was, around 4 or 5 minutes. Maybe that's when he threw Waddell and Bergen and realized just like it wasn't in the cards to get there or whatever. So
5 minutes left, because I have it here. With 5 minutes left, that's when Braden was pulled for the last time. He did keep Colvin in and Heide for a couple. At that point, Purdue was down 24, and then they finished the game down 11.
Yeah. Heather Garrison says, yay for the volleyball team. Yes, indeed. Yay for the volleyball team. Congrats to Dave Shondell. Congrats to all the players, Raven Colvin, Taylor Anderson, Chloe Chicoine, Eva Hudson. I'm missing some. Just congrats to all of you all. And good luck and continued success in the tournament. Again, go support them. Louisville's not far away. Tomorrow's important, but Purdue should get through tomorrow. Next time they play down at Louisville Regional, y'all should travel there.
Agreed. Shout out Purdue volleyball. I'm excited. Excited for the volleyball tournament. I watched some of it today in general. Had the Purdue game on in the background. It's a team that I think Louisville will be tough if they do face Louisville, but the team like Purdue has shown they can compete with any and everybody, right? In the entire country. So should be a fun run. It is good to finish on some positivity there as Purdue volleyball hopes to make another deep run. Also, oh man, I forget the exact stat, but I know Shondell's made the NCAA tournament like 20 something straight years. And because I did, when we had him on and before the Final Four, I was doing a little research and I wish I had the exact stats, and I don't think I do anymore, but it was like, they haven't lost like a first round game in like over a decade, where like they make the tournament and win their first round game every time. It's pretty wild. So shout out them. Shout out Kraig for putting up with me. Shout out me for putting up with Kraig for an hour and a half. As Purdue takes their worst loss of the year. This is worse than the Marquette loss, just with how Penn State kind of punked them. But we will be back Sunday. It is a noon tip against Maryland. That game is on. What is that game on?
I don't know.
Sunday noon.
Greg
tip,
would be
Big
proud
Sun
of
Network
us, though.
at noon. What?
Greg would be proud of us. Hour and a half show.
Yes, he definitely would. So we'll be back for that. I assume we're going to get out a preview in theory probably tomorrow, but TBD on that. Appreciate everybody tuning in and the support. Like, subscribe. If you are still tuned in this late into the show, really does help us out. And yeah, we'll be back Sunday after Purdue takes on Maryland.